Assalamu alaikum and a very warm welcome to the show. You're watching Let's Talk. My name is Anwar Mia and we have two guests today who are going to be speaking and discussing with us the very important topic of Brexit. Yes, ladies and gentlemen, we are in the final days of this deadline of the 31st of January 2020. And in those last days, we're going to be discussing with our two guests the ramifications, the implications, the consequences of this all-important date, what's going to happen now and in the foreseeable future, and what effect, if any, it has on us, the British Bangladeshi community. So let me introduce you to them. But just before I do, as usual, this is an interactive show. There will be shortly a number at the bottom of your screens. If you have an opinion, if you have a comment, or if you'd have a question indeed that you'd like to put to any of our guests, then please feel free to call the number and we will try and discuss that with you and them. To my left, ladies and gentlemen, is somebody who requires no introduction, a former Labour Party councillor and now a member, and in her own right, originally qualified as a barrister and, as I understand it, now a solicitor, Jusna Mia. Jusna, welcome to the show. Assalamu alaikum.
Wa alaikum assalam. I'm not a solicitor.
Oh, right.
So,
but you work in a solicitor's firm.
I work in a solicitor firm.
Right,
yes,
there we are. And to my right is again somebody who has been at these studios before and discussing on this very show, in fact, matters relating to a number of different issues. But he's an expert on data privacy and his name is Jamal Ahmed. Jamal bhai, assalamu alaikum. Welcome to the show.
Wa alaikum assalam. Thank you for inviting me.
You're most welcome, and we're grateful to both of you that you could take your time out today to join us and share with our respective viewers their thoughts on Brexit. Now, allow me to turn, firstly, if I may, to my right to Jamal bhai. Now, you're a data privacy expert. Now, of course, we know that there is going to be, on the 31st of January, a withdrawal, a technical withdrawal from the European Union, because I say technical in the sense that there will still be a transition period to the end of the year, within which there are going to be attempts to have a free trade agreement with the rest of Europe, failing which there are going to be checks and customs inquiries and so on and so forth, until, of course, we have such deals in place. The question I'd like to ask you is that with the various agreements, the law enforcement, the data sharing, the security, all of these issues, the kind of yellowhammer considerations that we also had, and which I know you worked on as well, what is your opinion and what is your view about what's going to happen on the 31st of January? Are we going to be jumping off a cliff, or are we going to be only in the embryonic stages of further trade deals, not just with the European Union, but throughout the rest of the world? And what are the fears that we should have?
So I think the fear that we should have is not acting and not taking enough action. A lot of people will wait until the 31st of January. Nothing's going to change. They're really unsure. Is there going to be a deal? Is there not going to be a deal? And they're going to do what they always do, is wait till the last minute until they have certainty. Nobody wants to start investing money and effort and resources in something that might not matter when we get to December. So everyone's kind of taking a step back and having a look. But what I've found with clients, especially the larger corporates, is they're taking those measures in place when it comes to sharing data, and they're looking at all of their contracts, and they're putting in place contingencies in case we leave at the end of the year and we haven't found a place where we are adequate or seen adequate as part of the EA, and we can't have that free sharing of data. So when it comes to data, certainly I've seen corporates taking action. When it comes to some of the other areas of free trade of capital, free trade of goods, I know a lot of companies are moving a lot of their capital and their cash over into Europe, into places like Luxembourg, into other tax havens, and removing that capital and goods away from the UK.
As I understand it, you're not politically active with a particular party. You may have, of course, have your own political personal views, but in terms of any activist arrangement, I don't think you're a member.
I am not affiliated to any political party.
So you're an ideal candidate for me to ask this following question. In your opinion, you, Joe Public, irrespective of the way you voted at the referendum,
or not.
Sorry?
Or not.
Or not, of course, stand to be corrected. Irrespective of the way you voted or not, or whatever personal views you have, what is going to happen? I mean, the 31st of January, is Boris Johnson ready and able? Is he doing a good job? Has he got these contingencies, so to speak, in place? Does he know what he's doing, in your opinion, as an independent arbiter, someone who's sitting back and observing the two sides warring and blaming each other for deficiencies in their approaches?
Well, look, Boris Johnson is a very incredible character, for want of a better expression. And he has he has his party, he has his cabinet with him, and he has all of the civil servants that are there to get the job done. Now, whether Boris is actually responsible for getting that job done, or whether he'll receive a dossier and that will tell him what to say, that depends on all the civil servants that we have working in Whitehall. And I have a confidence in the government, in all of our civil servants working in Whitehall and our other MPs, that together we will get a result. It might not be the result we wanted, but it will be a result that can move the country forward, inshallah.
Right, I mean, that's very good. Now, I want to put something to you. The UKIP party, right, as I understand it, and again, you can correct me if I'm wrong, you were approached to develop their GDPR policy.
That was for the BREXIT party.
For the BREXIT party, forgive me, the BREXIT party, which originally I suspect was formed from or the offshoot of a faction of the UKIP party. And in any event, it was Nigel Farage and whoever he was, standing on the soapbox for at the particular time.
Correct.
As I understand it, you rejected the offer of developing their GDPR policy, which in itself is an honour. I mean, we're talking about a political party approaching you, which sheds light on your abilities, and that's great. Are you able to let us in the know as to what was going through your mind in terms of your political view or your opinion as to this whole Brexit situation? Because you must have had a particular bias in order for you to reject the offer of a mainstream organisation approaching you for expertise.
So, yeah, we was approached by the BREXIT party, and they wanted us to consult for them on a 6-month project worth about 30 grand. So what we did is we rejected them based on our values and principles. We put our principles before our profits. At KZN Privacy Experts, it's all about principles. Profits come secondary. As long as we're doing the right thing, that's the most important thing. Now, the reason we rejected the BREXIT party was nothing to do with where they stand on the political spectrum or their views on Brexit or their views on whether staying in. It was purely to do with the fact for what they stand for. So if you look at the first leader, the person that founded the party, she has a history of Islamophobic tweets and abuse about people like me, my mother, my sister, my family, Muslims in general. And more and more information came to the fore. So there is no way KZN Privacy Experts will work with any organisation that spews hate, that looks to divide our communities.
Well, just so that we're on the right side of the legal position and Ofcom situation, I must put to you that there is no evidence that either of the parties that you've mentioned, Brexit Party or whoever, has actually engaged in Islamophobia. That is a subjective view that you have. So I have a duty to put that to you.
So from my personal research and from anyone that types in Brexit Party racist on the internet on Google right now, you will see that there are article after article about tweet after tweet about how former...
That is your view, your subjective view.
No, this is facts. These are facts.
Well,
These are facts available
the Brexit Party may well, if they were here, they would say, of course, that look, we're not Islamophobic. We have a particular view. We have an issue with immigration. We believe that immigration has led to pressure on our services, such as the NHS and education and housing and so on and so forth. And they would perhaps argue that the very fact that we have a surging population, the vast majority of which has emanated not from the expansion of the host population, but from overseas migration, that therefore they are quite legitimate in their signposting of, or finger pointing rather, that they are, the immigrants are responsible for the pressure on the social, on those services, which does not by default mean that they're Islamophobic. Now, I just put that out there. I put that out there just to put that. But moving on from the point, I appreciate that you have a particular ethos, and your particular view is that the Brexit Party does not sit well with the best interests of migrants and those of a particular faith or faith communities, and so on and so forth. And I appreciate that. But what I'm saying is that the reality is, and this is the fact, Nigel Farage won. He spearheaded a campaign. He was the flag bearer of a particular campaign. He won. Whether we agree with it or not, he won. Eventually, we find ourselves in a situation where exactly what he wanted has happened. What is now your view? The person who effectively did not wish to support that initiative by whatever means necessary or what was deemed of him, now finds himself in a position where Brexit is happening. What goes through your mind?
So just to make it clear, the reason for rejecting the Brexit Party was not because the party has any evidence of being racist. It was because the people that are part of the party, the leaders, have a history of not being let's just say, fully congruent and not being people who people would aspire to be like. You wouldn't want your children to be like those people. You don't want someone standing in front of a poster saying, you know, oh, there's all of these refugees coming into this country, making up all of these panic, creating panic for no reason. You don't want someone representing you who's putting out hate on their personal Twitter feed. So these are the individuals who have no morals, no kind of compassion or no kind of support for helping economic migrants do well. And they're promoting racism. They're promoting this idea of white supremacy. These are the kind of people we rejected. Those are the values we rejected. Those are the ethos we rejected. It was nothing to do with Brexit or not Brexit. Either way, Brexit is very profitable for us. We have a whole lot of work to do. So if Brexit happens, and now that Brexit has happened, we have a lot of work that we do, and we are engaged in a lot of contracts, and we're helping people understand where their data is, how that data is being transferred. So Brexit has actually been very profitable for us. It was never about Brexit. The issue was with the people representing the Brexit party. We did not want to work with such people, and we did not want to be associated with them. Our principle and our values stop us from working with such organisations.
Thank you very much. Very, very interesting. Now, I'm going to turn to Barrister Justa. You've been involved with the Labour Party for some time. The Labour Party has come under intense criticism for, some say, failing to have a clear policy on Brexit, failing to be able to communicate, even if you felt that they did have a clear policy, failing to be able to communicate with the electorate, and without doubt, failing to be able to connect with the electorate. What do you say about the Labour Party's position on Brexit?
Well, I wouldn't, thank you for having me here. I wouldn't say that Labour Party doesn't have a clear policy. My stance is, like personally, this is me as an individual, I believe, and I mean, the Labour Party's policy has been very clear. Yes, there has been following from the general election, there has been a lot of criticism about the Labour Party and their approach to Brexit. It was very clear. Labour Party stance were very clear in the sense that what the Labour Party wanted, that go back to the electorate, give them the option, whether it's through referendum or otherwise, and then get their say in how to go about the future, really, about Brexit and the deal and so forth. Labour parties had a very clear policy in terms of if the UK leaves with from European Union, what they wanted was a deal which suit the people of UK, that we can come out with a better deal that is profitable for the United Kingdom and its economy. They wanted a good deal in relation to the goods and services, a trade deal which will benefit the country and so forth. And they wanted for us to stay within the custom union. This is the Labour Party's policy if we had left without a proper sort of stance. So it's not that Labour Party didn't have a clear picture of how to approach Brexit and so forth, but it just happened that the general election didn't go in the favour of Labour Party.
Well, no, we need to rewind a little bit. If you're saying that the Labour Party had a clear policy, were they able to communicate and connect with the electorate?
Well,
because we are jumping from having a policy and then saying, well, we had a policy, but we lost the election. I mean, there's an interim factor here. Having that policy, if it wasn't connecting to the public, if it wasn't being communicated effectively to the public, that of course has a consequence, which means that it would not find favour in the public.
But I mean, it's not fair to say that the Labour Party did not connect to the public.
Well,
the Labour Party,
disastrously.
yeah, but that doesn't mean that, yes, there is that loss that they've lost disastrously. And I think the British, the people were so fed up with Brexit and how everything happened. People just wanted to go ahead and just wanted to vote for the Tory and just get it over and done with. It's not because get Brexit over and done with. It's not because, I don't think it's because the Labour Party failed to connect to the electorate. The Labour Party made a very clear manifesto in relation to their position as regards Brexit, and that was that. I mean, it's not either yes we will remain or no we won't remain. We will leave. but that is to leave it to the public once the general election was over. This is Labour Party going back to the people of the UK.
But they had left it to the public, and that was that we had a referendum.
Yes.
We had an outcome.
Yes.
And they, you know, to say that you want to leave it to the public again, in the event, for example, that you had another referendum, and that in that referendum again it was marginal, and you had 52-48. What are we going to have, a third referendum, fourth referendum? Let me come back to you on that, ladies and gentlemen. Just before I revert back to Barrister Jusna, I'm going to ask you, what are your views on Brexit? Are you a member of the Labour Party or a supporter of the Labour Party? Do you have a particular view from that particular standpoint? Are you a member or an activist of the Conservative Party? I know we have a contingent within our community who do support, some of whom are activists of the Conservative Party. We'd like to hear your views as to what you believe is the future following on from Brexit, and in fact Brexit itself, what you believe in respect of that. I mean, are you celebrating Brexit? Are you mourning Brexit? What consequence, if any, do you believe it will play in your own lives as a result of the outcome that we're going to be having in 10 days' time? I should even say, just for the avoidance of excluding anyone, maybe you're a member or a supporter of the UK Party or the Brexit Party. Maybe you're a supporter of the instigators and the supporters of Brexit from the embryonic stages as it then was. What are your thoughts? We'd like to hear from you too. And particularly if, for example, you're a resident of the European Union, perhaps even a citizen of the European Union. I know Channel S has a wide reach and is broadcast internationally. So if you're watching, we'd like to hear from you as well. And whilst you think about that and perhaps dial in, I'm going to go back to Barrister Jusna, as I did say I would. Look, isn't it the harsh reality? Aside from the fact that you say, getting Brexit done, which was the Conservative Party's motto, getting Brexit done, perhaps there's an element of truth in what you say about the public, whether they voted Labour, whether they normally vote Labour or any other party, simply bought on, onto the bandwagon of just getting Brexit done. Aside from that, going back to your own party's policy, I mean, to say that we've had a referendum, but we're going to do something else, negotiate and have further discussions, and then putting it back to the people again, isn't it the harsh reality that this would be going on and on and on without anything in the horizon as to when it's going to be dealt with? People were frankly fed up, weren't they?
Well, I mean, this is exactly why I said that people were fed up.
Then why did the Labour Party have a policy of dragging it out even further? No, why didn't the Labour Party say, we will get Brexit done, we're going to put it to you, but then we're going to get it done?
Well, the Labour Party said that their position was that they want to come out with a deal. Conservative didn't come out with a deal. They had one agenda. That is, we want to get Brexit done. The Tory Party
Conservative Party never said that they didn't want a deal.
No, they want a deal, but they failed to get a deal. They failed to get a deal. There were 3 times they failed to get across.
Well, no, I think what you mean is that they put the deal before the Parliament,
yes,
and 3 times that was turned down.
Yes, that was turned down, but a deal which was.
But that was your party not voting for it.
Yeah, as well.
So how can you point the finger at the Conservative Party and say the Conservative Party failed to get a deal when the very deal that they did get, they put before Parliament, and it was your party who failed to support that deal?
It wasn't just our party. It wasn't just the Labour Party. There were a number of. Yeah, obviously. It wasn't. What I'm trying to say is that it wasn't just the Labour Party who opposed that. There were a lot of people within. They did. Yeah. They did. Yeah. The Labour Party's position was very clear in that they opposed it. But within the Conservative, within the Tory, there were people against that as well. So you can't just say that it was just the Labour Party's position that, okay, they want to be difficult or that they want to oppose it. But they opposed, no doubt, because the deal was not favourable to the people of the UK.
But the Labour Party's position is that the Conservative Party couldn't get a deal. They did get a deal. You failed to support it.
Yeah, because that deal was not the deal that that would benefit the people of the UK.
But that's according to your opinion. But now, what's the situation that Labour Party faces itself now in as a result of the annihilation at the elections?
Yes.
Is that because of the huge disproportionate balance, imbalance rather, within Parliament, whatever the Conservative Party puts forward,
that's going to go through.
It's going to go through. So isn't it the case that your party not only is losing, but for you now to say that the country as a whole will lose under any Conservative Party deal, whatever it is, whatever the Conservative Party puts through, will eventually get through.
Yes.
How on earth did that create a possibility for the Labour Party to be able to be successful? Because would it not have been sensible to allow the Conservative Party deal to go through, and then you would not be finding yourself in the quagmire that you are in now?
I mean, the results of the general election has been shocking. It's surprised me, and I'm sure it surprised many of the people out there. And as far as the Labour Party's position is concerned, I mean, it is shocking. It's been like we've lost a lot of sort of MPs, a lot of seats which has been held by the Labour Party for many years. So that has been a shock. And I mean, it's not to say that the Labour Party does not. I mean, we need to sort of look back and see where we went wrong, no doubt. But as far as Brexit is concerned, Brexit, as I said earlier, and you've also stated as well, that people were fed up. People want one way or the other, that they didn't want. What the Labour Party did propose obviously didn't go through, but Labour Party had a very good intention of getting back to the people if it came to that, but obviously it didn't materialize. And here we are with the situation, as Tory said, that we will get Brexit done by hook or by either way we're going to have it done, and that's where that's where we are at the moment. There will be a lot of celebration, Anwar, 31st when it happens, and there will be a lot of sadness as well. There are clear reasons why there would be sadness, but celebration so that people know now that yes, enough is enough. We are moving forward, because there was so much uncertainty.
Thank you very much, Barrister Jusna. I'm stopping you there only because of time reasons, ladies and gentlemen. We must go to a break. When we come back, we will carry on discussing that particular topic. But let me say, whether or not we're going to have a celebration, it is going to be with the absence of a chiming from Big Ben, because as I understand it, the £500,000 required in order for Big Ben to chime has not yet been reached. So celebrations without Big Ben chiming. Do stay with us. Don't go too far. Hopefully we'll see you in a very short while, inshallah. Assalamu alaikum. Assalamu alaikum, welcome back. We are discussing Brexit, the last days of this awful saga, awful chapter. Whether or not you're actually for Brexit, the reality is, and I'm sure most people would agree, that it's been very exhausting, very tiring in the media, nothing but Brexit. Luckily we have some other topics more recently in play, but Brexit has dominated in recent years, and to some, certainly to my guests from the Labour Party, they believe that that was the cause of the downfall of the Labour Party, certainly insofar as the elections, the outcome was concerned. But we'd like to hear from you, and we'd like to hear from our guests about the final days of Brexit, the consequences and the implications of the same upon not only Great Britain as a whole, but also the British Bangladeshi community. Ladies and gentlemen, as always, an interactive show. If you wish to participate with your thoughts or questions, do indeed feel free to call in, and we hope to be able to hear from you. Just before we went off air, we were listening to Barrister Justa, who says that the Labour Party had a convincing and clear, crystal clear policy on Brexit that was in the it was in the not only the manifesto, but of course it was in the minds of the people when they actually voted at the elections. And perhaps, in her view, it was because people simply wanted to have Brexit done and dusted, that irrespective of the fact that they'd been voting for the Labour Party for years and years, they nevertheless felt the need to dispense with the Brexit topic once and for all. What does Jamal Bhai think of that?
So you said quite a lot there. Let me start with why I believe the Conservative Party won the election. I believe they won the election because they had better marketing skills, they had better marketing budget, and ultimately that's what won. If you look at how much the Tories spent online advertising and profiling people, we're not talking about just an advert everyone sees. They sent specific messages to specific people based on their profile, and they knew this is the language we need to speak to them. The amount of Labour voters that they sent fake and false news to and turned them off and stopped them from going to the polls and voting to begin with, the amount of people, young people that they gave wrong information to, and the amount of people that they lied to, that's ultimately what won them the election. It was nothing to do with this Brexit policy. Yes, it had something to do with it, but their election was won on their online digital marketing spend. And they will tell you that themselves. And if you look at the spend they had compared to Labour, there's a difference of about almost, I think, 11 or 12 times. And I think that's where the election was won and lost.
So you have disproportionate spending, but you level a very serious allegation that there was misinformation peddled.
It's a fact that's in press, and you can.
It's your opinion. It's your opinion. I mean, do you have a source that you can cite, or is it a fact that you can? If
I can't tell you the fact off the top
sure,
of my head, but
sure.
I can find that source if you give me 5 minutes on a phone.
Right, sure, no problem. But if essentially you say that there was misinformation which was filtering down to even Labour Party members, as a result of which loyal supporters deserted the Labour Party.
So the day the Labour Party released the manifesto, a fake Labour site was put up by the Tory Party, full of lies, full of misinformation.
And it wasn't just
getting the electorate to switch off from voting Labour. The way you win an election is to get the majority of people voting for you. How do you do that? You convince people to vote for you, but at the same time you convince other people, don't go out and vote for your opposition. And that's how to win an election. You don't need to tell people to vote for you. You stop people from voting for the other guy. And that's exactly what they did.
So you believe that this kind of misinformation and effectively concealment and deceit is which is where you're pitching it, rather harsh allegations, very serious allegations. But, of course, the Conservative Party would deny that. They'd say that we were only mirroring what the Labour Party position is, and having mirrored that correctly, without making it disproportionate, we're flagging up what we say, the threats and the fears that you should have as a result of a possible Labour government. What's wrong with that?
Well, I mean, it's very hard for them to deny the facts. And if they were standing here, they might very well do that. But we have the evidence that we can go back to them with. We have people that were campaigning for political messaging to be banned on platforms. Twitter actually went out and said, OK, we're not going to take on any more political adverts. But Facebook said, actually, we are going to take political adverts. And even if the information is false, well, that's not really our problem. We're going to let people put out whatever political opinion they want to put out. And that's a current time debate that we have right now. The debate is still ongoing. Facebook are saying we will not verify the factual accuracy of political ads. We will take their money and show it to people.
The Conservative Party, and because they're not here, I have to put it to you and put a balancing perspective. The Conservative Party would say, first of all, there was no deceit. And secondly, the information that was put forward was supported by the people. That's why they voted for them. Are you suggesting that the people are gullible? Are you suggesting that they are people who who lack intelligence, perhaps, that they cannot make their own mind up? Is that what you're saying?
What I'm saying to you is the average reading age of the UK population is about 9 years old. So if you think the electorate that came out and voted, the average reading age of them was 9 years old, you have to talk to them in a language that they understand. And what the Tories were very good at doing was telling them all this stuff about this chap called Jeremy Corbyn and how evil he is and how he's a terrorist sympathiser. And you had people believing all sorts of nonsense about probably the most genuine politician of our time. Now, I'm not saying that because I'm a Labour supporter, but I've looked at politicians, we see politicians, and we see what they've stood for over the test of history. So we had Tory party prime ministers that called Nelson Mandela a terrorist. Right now he's celebrated as someone that stands for peace, that stands for the struggle. And then we have this guy, Jeremy Corbyn, who from his history, throughout his career, we've seen he's always been on the right side of history.
Again,
to paint such a bad picture of this chap and stop people from voting for him.
Well, again, to be fair to the other side, the fact is that there was an acknowledged anti-Semitism crisis within the Labour Party. There was a connection between Jeremy Corbyn and some say, not me personally, but some say, and I need to put their position to you, with unsavory characters, as they would put it. People such as members of Hamas being called friends, and him supporting various tweets, retweeting.
Hamas is an elected government.
But it's also recognised or labelled as a terrorist organisation.
It was.
Right. So the Conservative Party, the leader of the opposition, as in now is.
Again, so was Nelson Mandela was labelled a terrorist as well.
But the fact is, as it stands now, the leader of the opposition, as he still now is, but not for much longer, he was actually aligned with terrorists. He was photographed with various.
I don't know about aligned with terrorists. You
he was. No.
He might have been in the same room as people.
Well, he was photographed with them. He was. Yeah. The allegations are that he was alleged to have called them friends of his. He has refused to deny the existence of anti-Semitism or he's certainly refused to be able to deal with the anti-Semitism crisis. He failed to apologize a number of times at a number of interviews for the anti-Semitism crisis within the Labour Party. And there is some truth in there, is it not, that he was quite frankly incapable of dealing with the issues that the Labour Party found itself in because of all the controversy that it found itself in. There was a time when they refused to adopt the UNHCR definition of anti-Semitism, for example, and Jeremy Corbyn hesitated, stuttered in order to be, before he would actually let the Labour Party accept that definition as within its own manifesto.
Well, I mean, look, I'm not here to comment, and I'm certainly not here to represent Jeremy Corbyn.
No, it's on the back of what you're saying.
So
you're the one who's pitching Jeremy
so
Corbyn.
As a non,
and you have a lot of sympathy. You have a lot of sympathy, but we have to put it to you in the interest of fairness.
So the way I see it is, look, yes, there is an issue of anti-Semitism in the Labour Party. It would be silly of anyone to deny that. So we accept that. Now, how many times is this one guy going to get hounded by it? You've got the Rupert Murdoch press constantly bringing it up, constantly bringing it up, constantly bringing it up. How many times is he meant to apologise? And the more he apologises, the more trouble he's going to get. He got to a stage where he's like, there's a problem in the party, we're going to deal with it, leave it at that. But no, the media kept blowing it out of proportion. If you look at the problems the Labour Party has when it comes to anti-Semitism, why is nobody talking about the Islamophobic problems other parties have, especially the Tories? How many times did Boris Johnson apologise for his Islamophobic comments? How many times was he asked to apologise for that?
He was asked a number of times. He failed to be equivocal, or unequivocal rather, in terms of his apology, whether it's the letterbox comments or the piccaninnies or whatever else it was. But the fact is that did not connect with the people. The public simply didn't consider that sufficient enough to be able to say that he's not fit to lead.
And I think a lot of the public have been swayed and persuaded to look at certain things in a certain way because of the press and because of the spend that the Conservatives have behind them.
Is there a wider problem here? Do we live in a racist society per se? Do we find ourselves in a position where, because people have said this before, many before me, who've said that the Brexit vote was underlined or propped up by an element of racism, maybe a watered-down version of it. Is that the case? Are we living in a racist society?
So I wouldn't go as far as saying we live in a racist society, but what I would say, racism is a problem in this society. And post-Brexit, and when Brexit came onto the table, we have seen a significant rise in Islamophobic attacks. We've also seen a significant rise in racist attacks. And all of that happened as a trend just after Brexit. So yes, there are issues with racism in our society that need to be addressed, and a lot of people would say, most people think by voting Brexit they're stopping foreigners from coming into this country. Actually, that's not what Brexit is about, and it's not really going to stop foreigners coming to this country. Brexit is to do with leaving Europe and the free trade and the free movement of people with Europe. That's not going to have any impact on all of the other refugees and other people outside of Europe that this country and some of the residents in this country are worried about coming through their borders.
Jamal Bhai, you touched on a very important point, actually, a very topical point about the refugees, because it was today that in the House of Lords, the bill that was passed in Parliament, the Dubs situation about child refugees uniting with their families, whether they'd be able to, children fleeing from war-torn parts of the world, reuniting with their parents who may be in Europe or in the United Kingdom, for example, that's been defeated by the House of Lords. So the Conservative Party, Boris Johnson in particular, has been left rather red-faced because of that. Now, you're an expert in immigration law. Is it the case that children fleeing war, trying to reunite themselves with their parents who were recognised as refugees in the United Kingdom, should they be allowed to do that? I mean, the Dublin Convention tells us that they can. Now, we're going to be leaving we're going to be leaving the European Union. In the event that we do, the Dublin Convention eventually, after the transition period, will not be applicable, as a result of which this particular legislation, had it gone through the House of Lords and consequently received royal assent, would have meant that aside from the Dublin Convention, which would no longer then apply, if we did not have legislation in place enabling the reunification or the family reunion, so to speak, that's draconian, isn't it? What would happen?
It is. You see, Anwar, there are wider implications.
Yeah.
And there are huge challenges that will be faced by the UK when it comes to legislation. Because we will be, after the transition period, we will be out completely.
Yeah.
So
the various conventions which will not apply.
Will not apply. So the European Union, the law that is applicable to UK now.
In this case, the Dublin Convention 1, 2, 3.
It's not going to be part of the UK. I mean, we are not going to be
bound
by that. UK will have to think about replacing those laws and how they're going to go about it. So there's a huge challenge before not only the government.
But Barrister Justin, that's precisely what they were trying to do now, because they were trying to replace that law with a law to say effectively that child refugees cannot reunite themselves with their parents in the United Kingdom, to the horror of the House of Lords, and in fact the very proponent of it, the Dubs amendment as it was called then, to the horror of those behind that as well.
Yeah, no, I understand that. But what I'm saying is, obviously, it's a draconian situation. Yeah. It is, no doubt. But what I'm trying to say is that there are going to be serious issues faced by the UK when it comes to legislation and what law they want to pass in order so as to protect individuals such as refugees, whether in this scenario or in other scenarios, because there could be more introductions of legislations that they want to bring about, and that will fail or it will go through, which will have wider implications or negative implications on the rights of the individuals in this country.
What implications does it have in respect of the British Bangladeshi community?
Well, there are, in terms of the immigration, which this brother Jamal Bhai touched on, there are, even in relation to the immigration changes that's going to be coming into effect. Like what the Tory wants to do is introduce, which probably has some sort of positive side to it, is bring in the Australian appointment system into effect. That's what they want to do. When it came to Labour Party's policy about immigration, the Labour Party had very clear stance on immigration in relation to the 18,600 income threshold, in relation to the other areas of concern about bringing in appeal rights and so forth. Conservative doesn't have that. Conservative is going to continue with whatever is in place and bringing in appointment system like Australia's and so forth. They want to attract the most highly skilled individuals coming to this country, but there are sectors in this country which actually is suffering as a result of the unskilled worker. So what about the unskilled worker?
So just to put this into perspective, the European Union legislations, the various treaties that we've had, from the Treaty of Versailles, Maastricht, the number of different treaties that you've had, they laid the foundation to secure basic fundamental freedoms and rights. Yeah, these include workers' rights, for example, which, because we'll be coming out of the European Union, we'll need to devise a different, not different necessarily, hopefully not, but a separate set of rights, which may or may not be on par with what we've got at the moment. Yes. You have the judicial safeguards that we currently enjoy, as well as the various human rights situations which are guaranteed by the ECHR. They may not be in future applicable or valid. And it's interesting what you say about the points-based system, because Priti Patel, Home Secretary, as we speak, is putting forward legislation, not just on the Australian-style points-based system, but also in terms of things like tougher sentencing, she calls it, yes. Minimum sentencing, which as lawyers, I suppose we're slightly concerned about, because the problem with having guaranteed minimum sentencing for certain offences means that you do not allow for, in some cases, serious mitigation, which may mean that a minimum sentence is not warranted. So the judge's hands are tied, and there's a lot of dangers which are posed by them. But also, she's talking about, at the moment, the polygraph test, the lie detector test, in terms of those suspected of being radicalised, and then de-radicalised. Whether or not they are in fact de-radicalised, they want to put in polygraph tests to have that neurological testing in order to see whether or not that person is lying when they say that they are de-radicalised. Worrying, isn't it?
Very worrying.
Now, where do you see that? Because Boris Johnson is not necessarily known for being tough on that sort of thing. Because when he was mayor of London, he was rather liberal. In fact, there were suggestions. Towards immigration, because there were suggestions at the time, for example, that he wanted to introduce an amnesty for migrants, that if you've been here for so many years, you'd be allowed to stay, whether it was 10 years or not. And then you have
and he reconfirmed that in Parliament.
He affirmed that, yes, he did.
Yes.
Now, the thing is, and then you have Priti Patel who comes in, and some say straight out of the Modi type of stance and school of thought, rather harsh and radical on people who are perceived to be aliens and those who do not quite fit from a particular background. Where do you or the Labour Party see this country heading? Because at the moment with Brexit, which is what we're talking about today, we have the erosion of fundamental rights. We have replacements which are not quite on par with what we're replacing and or currently accustomed to and enjoying. Are we heading towards a kind of regime in the United Kingdom which is going to be very scary, not perhaps what the electorate bargained for, and certainly not perhaps what a large proportion of the British Bangladeshi community bargained for, because some of them did in fact vote this very government into power?
Yes, I think, to be fair, I mean, with Priti Patel, I mean, I see that there are going to be a lot of problems. I mean, there is a clear disparity between what she's trying to do and what Boris Johnson appeared to be even when he was the mayor of London in relation to the immigration and the migrant community. Now, in terms of the uncertainty and the worrying factor is that when we come out of the European community, as you said and as I said earlier, that the fundamental rights that's being protected at the moment will have to be replaced by legislation in this country. How it's going to be done, in what sort of time frame it's going to be done, is a big question.
Okay, well look, sorry, go on, just finish the point.
I was just going to say, the civil servant, the way they're working, they have to increase the number of civil servants because there's no way they're going to do all this.
Okay, let me turn this argument on its head and imagine, if you will, if the Conservative Party were here, they'd be saying, look, we need tougher sentencing. Look at the situation that we've had where we had lenient sentences, which has led to the awful incidents that have happened more recently in the United Kingdom.
But the government is failing. Sorry to say, the government is failing. We have got the knife crime. If you look at the knife crime, the government is failing to give the basic protection to the individuals out there in the streets of UK. So you're talking about
what protection? Is it not the case then that we need this minimum?
No, we need
the kind of harsher approaches, which is exactly what protection is saying.
We need protection.
What kind of protection?
Police. How many police do we see in the streets of London?
The Conservative Party is going to be putting on 20,000 more police officers on the beat.
I wonder when. We've just had 3 killings, 3 stabbings in Ilford yesterday.
I'm going to stop you there, Barrister Jusna, because we have a caller online and I do want to hear their views as well, and I'll come back to you. Hello, caller. Assalamu alaikum. Hello, caller.
Oh, hello. Assalamu alaikum.
Assalamu alaikum. Walaikum salam. You're live on air. What would you like to say?
Yeah, my name is Shakat and I'm ringing from Manchester.
Shakat, most welcome from Manchester.
Yeah. Well, I'd like to say when we eventually come out of Brexit, I think on the short run, I think it will be a success. But on the long run, I think it's going to be a failure. And the reason why I'm saying that is because, I mean, we need people coming from young people who can work, able to work people in this country to pay enough money into the pension fund. Otherwise, we'll be all working till we drop dead. And then the second thing I like to say, Boris Johnson is going to adopt Donald Trump American policies, and it's going to have a direct effect on the NHS and other privatization in this country. And it's going to be, on the long run, it's going to be a disaster.
Okay, tell us this. Trump-style policies, what kind of policies did you have in mind? I know you touch on the NHS, but you don't seem to detail that. What do you fear?
Well, it's going to be American-style health service. And like if you have insurance with the, then I mean.
But there's no evidence of that, is there? Because there's no suggestion that there's going to be privatisation of the NHS. The Conservative Party have made it clear that there's going to be no privatisation of the NHS, that it's not on the table in any negotiations with the United States. So where would you, Shaukat Bhai, get that from?
That's a good point you made, but let me answer you to that. When Boris Johnson was mayor of London, his chief executive said that he failed to keep every promise and deal that he made, and twice, not once, twice when he was a minister, he had to resign because he was found out to be lying. You never ever can trust this man.
Right, and in terms of young people, the other point that you make, we have in our home country, this country, Great Britain, we have a large number of young people, many of whom in certain quarters of the United Kingdom are unemployed. Why is it that we cannot draft them in to do that kind of unskilled labour?
Well, we can, but we need more people, even not just in this country, in whole of Europe. You need 20 million people from outside Europe to come in. Forget about this country. In whole of Europe, you need 20 million people who need to come from other countries beside Europe. Otherwise, there won't be enough money in the pension fund to pay for our pension. Everyone will be working till they drop dead.
Thank you very much, Shaukat Bhai from Manchester, for your call. I'm having to cut you off there because we're going to have to go into a break, ladies and gentlemen. Very interesting call by Shaukat Bhai, but the other side, some people may well say that we do have people in the United Kingdom who are able to do these low-skilled jobs, but it is also the case that legislation again is being put forward to make sure that unskilled labour is very migration from abroad for unskilled labour is very limited and restricted. This is another thing that Priti Patel, the Home Secretary, is engaging with at the moment. Do you have any thoughts? Maybe you'd like to share them with us, but not now. When we come back after this particular break, do stay tuned. Assalamu alaikum. Assalamu alaikum, welcome back. You're watching Let's Talk. My name is Anwar Mia and I have two guests. We are discussing Brexit. Yes, it's upon us, ladies and gentlemen. A few days' time, we'll tend to be precise. And they are, our guests are doing very well in enlightening us as to their views and their analysis of the Brexit situation that this country is facing. And we also digressed a little bit in trying to understand the impact on the British Bangladeshi community and the migrant communities as a whole, and whether or not we actually need more migrants to fill the vacancies, the kind of work that needs to be doing, and the vacuum that there will be, because in the event that there are no free movement provisions in place during the forthcoming negotiations of trying to secure a more detailed and better deal, what we're going to be facing is a shortage, an acute shortage perhaps, of people who are unable to do the kind of fruit picking or the other kind of unskilled labour that many people have been doing from different parts of Europe, whether it's in bars and clubs and whatever else, coffee shops and what have you, care homes. These kinds of jobs do need filling. Do we have sufficient people in place to do these kinds of jobs? I know not. Maybe you do. If you'd like to call in and give us your thoughts on Brexit and alternatively the impact that you believe it's going to have on you or your loved ones or indeed the community around you. Number at the bottom of your screen. Do feel free to call in. Jamal Bhai, now you're engaged in the British Bangladeshi community. You're well known, you're well respected. You know, people listen to what you have to say. In terms of the impact on the wider impact on the British Bangladeshi community, just now I was saying about the knife crime, in particularly in East London and South East London, the kind of difficulties and challenges and changes that are being faced by our own communities as a result of the kind of situations and circumstances that we're being faced. For example, as you know, the British Bangladeshi community has a particular presence in the catering industry. They are facing problems. They're unable to recruit people from overseas, particularly unskilled people, to do the kind of unsociable hours and the unskilled and unattractive jobs that are currently being done by people from overseas, and so on and so forth. Do you worry about the future of our community, having all sorts of hindrances and obstacles in their path?
So look, do I worry about the future of our community? No, because I believe that we will ultimately adapt and we will strive. We come from a background where that's what we've been doing. We've always been struggling, we've always adapted. Sure,
but are we though? Because as the statistics say, I know you're a fan of statistics, statistics say that 2 Indian restaurants are closing down every week. That, if anything, is worrying because two restaurants represent perhaps 15 or 20 jobs.
Yeah, so look, being from the British Bangladeshi background and also having family that's been involved in the catering industry.
Yeah,
My father had a restaurant in Brick Lane many years ago, and again, that had to close down as well. So I see the struggles people have in the catering industry.
Yeah.
And a lot of that struggle is they can't get competent staff.
Right.
And the other struggle is the rising cost of goods.
Yeah.
Cost of goods are rising, cost of labour is rising, cost of everything is rising.
Rent, rates, everything is
they're
there.
keeping steady the sell price. They're not passing those costs on to the customer.
They can't because it's competitive.
Exactly, and the thing is they're squeezing their margins to a point where there is no margin left, and they're actually continuing at a loss in often cases, where it becomes there's no point doing this. So if there's no point doing something, there's no reward at the end of the week or end of the month. How much passion are you going to have for that? At some point, you're going to say, let's call it a day. And that's exactly what we see happening is people are saying, it's not worth it anymore, let's call it a day. I can't take my prices up because all of the other the Indian restaurants with the 10-mile radius, they're not taking their prices up. I can't be the only one that does that. They're scared, there's fear that if they take their prices up, it's going to impact them negatively, and then people will go to the competition. And they're right. People will always go to where they get the best value for money.
Well, you seem to be echoing exactly what Shaukat Bhai was saying, the gentleman who called up from Manchester, and he was saying pretty much the same thing about the unskilled labour, the shortage that we're going to have, the vacuum that we're going to have, so to speak. My question to you, by way of a follow-up, is that at the moment, Priti Patel is putting forward legislation which means that unskilled labour will find it incredibly difficult to enter the United Kingdom. So she's effectively saying, unskilled labour, don't need it. I mean, isn't that going to create further obstacles to a position where, the British Bangladeshi community may well be saying, look, it's game, set and match, can't do this anymore, had enough, we need to move on.
It's definitely going to have a knock-on effect, and if you look at the whole supply chain, the cost of labour is going to increase at every step of the supply chain. It's not just going to be at one stage. So they're going to have increased costs because of that, because labour has to be more expensive. That's also, if we have Brexit, the costs on the borders, because of the change in logistics and the import and export taxes, that's going to have a big impact on the cost of ingredients. So you put that and that together, plus all of the other parts of the equation that we haven't even thought about and discussed yet, it's going to have a huge cost, and it's going to cost us a lot of money, especially our community.
And it's not just economics, is it? Because if you look at the wider picture, what happens when the financial position of a family is strained? You see unsociable activity taking place, people looking to maybe not the breadwinner, but their children, for example, looking at other ways of supplementing their income or being able to afford the same cars, the same trainers, same lifestyle as their peers. And that means that people look towards unorthodox means, perhaps even criminality, which they shouldn't be doing. And certainly, though if the restaurants are closed, there's no jobs available for them, they turn to other streams of income.
Yeah, and I mean, it's of no surprise to anyone that's lived in inner city, especially in and around East London, where you see open in front of your eyes people from our communities and other South Asian communities selling drugs, taking part in illegal activities, earning undeclared income,
taking risks which they should not be doing.
Which they should not be, simply because they need to make ends meet, and they want to put food, or they want to keep up with peer pressure.
Absolutely, and at the very least, having a presence on the high street when they could be doing more constructive things.
Of course.
I mean, you're from Tower Hamlets, you represented Tower Hamlets or a part of Tower Hamlets when you were a councillor. They are doing things which, even without the intent of doing any sort of criminality or unsociable activity, by default, the fact that they're loitering around, they find themselves in a situation where they're doing precisely that.
Whereas they could do something more constructive, as you said, that in terms of the curry industry, where the parents are, or the father mainly, who's involved, those who are involved with restaurant trade and so forth, they ultimately, if that exists, then ultimately the sons and the daughters eventually will get involved. Now we have a situation, whether it's Tower Hamlets or elsewhere, we have a situation where the youngsters, they don't have anything constructive to do, so they're loitering around outside with and getting involved in antisocial behavior without even realizing it. And this is really serious, because it's about time that this is actually handled carefully. What I want to say is, going back to the point that Jamal Bhai made, and that is that in terms of the curry industry, there are significant sort of changes in the curry industry. And when I say significant changes, there has been so many, sort of countless number of restaurants which has been closed down due to the fact that there are sort of shortage of occupation, a shortage of staff, whether it's for skilled such as chef or whether it's for the other like kitchen porters and kitchen assistants. We had recently we've had the Priti Patel saying she's going to introduce the Vindaloo Visa, and that actually raised a lot of or rather a lot of people from our community were very, very happy about it. But there is no such thing as a Vindaloo Visa. What actually happened is that the Migration Advisory Committee, they made a recommendation that the takeaway, in a takeaway before, where if there were people who wanted to work as chefs, and if that was not actually recognized as part of the shortage of occupation.
If you had a restaurant which had takeaway element,
that would not be that would strike it out.
Yeah.
So the only changes that took place is actually in relation to that. Now the chefs from takeaway are recognized as sort of falling apart, part of the shortage of occupation list. That's the only changes. But having said that, that's not enough. Sort of, they need to devise. Well, she's already indicated that there's going to be highly skilled immigrants who's going to be attracted to the UK.
The Australian
point-based system. But what about restaurant?
Which
we
in
talk
a sense
about,
we have already, because we've got a point-based system.
We've had HSMP. We've got the tier 1 system in place.
Which is modelled on the
same system. So we have that in place already. But what the curry industry also need, alongside chefs, the curry industry also need kitchen porters, kitchen assistants. Without them, they cannot.
But hang on, but these curry industry leaders are voting for the Tory party.
Well,
why are they doing that?
No idea. I mean, obviously, I think maybe next time you need to invite one or two of them.
But they don't come. We invite them.
Yeah.
The channel the Conservative Party, we constantly invite them. They walk around with handkerchiefs falling out of their pockets, and they're big shots because they bought their council house. They think they must vote Tory now. But the fact is that they're unable to actually provide solutions.
What they need to
what is the solution for this community? I mean, how does this community ring fence itself from the dangers and the challenges that are being faced by other communities?
First of all, we need to understand what the actual problems are. The problems out there are that our young generations are getting into drugs, as Jamal Bhai said.
Rightly said.
Prostitution is on the increase. I mean, people don't talk about it, but that's there. And that's because of the fact that they don't have anything to do. They don't have. The parents probably are busy elsewhere. They're not realizing what their children are doing. Drugs, knife crimes, loitering around, antisocial behavior, criminal damages, you name it, and our kids are there doing it. So we need to understand that there is a huge problem out there. We need to get those children or the young generation away from the street, and the only way we can do it is if we recognize and we accept that there is a problem. Because what we are doing is that we are in denial. Still, we are in denial. We don't want to accept that there is a huge problem out there. And only when we can do that, we as a community, whether it's the curry industry...
What do you need from the government? What can the government do? Because at the moment, I know that the British Bangladeshi community is extremely good at trying to address these problems. We have initiative after initiative of these kinds of things. Different quarters and elements of the community are hands-on when it comes to these things. What can the government do?
We need funding for youth centres.
Right.
We need more funding. There has been huge cuts in Tower Hamlets. If I talk about Tower Hamlets, when I was a councillor for Tower Hamlets, we had so many youth centres where there were. And there were other sort of youth workers who were actually involved with drugs.
Right.
They came out, but they managed to come out of it. And these were the people who were going and doing outreach work.
Right.
They knew they had the first experience, so they know exactly what to say and how to handle those individuals. So we need youth centres.
But Tower Hamlets has been run by Labour for a long time. Apart from that spell.
But there is. I mean, when there is a cut from the central government, obviously there has to be I'm not supporting the fact that there was huge sort of cut in the services, but that's because the funding from the central government were cut down. Coming back to the point that you've raised, we need more police officers in the streets. There was a time a couple of years ago where we had community police in Tower Hamlets, and they carried out a pilot study, and that showed a huge reduction in criminal activities. So we need more visibility of the police in the streets of London.
Right, I
not
mean,
in Tower
you
Hamlets.
raise a number of points there. You know, if I can just touch on one or two of them. Things like, for example, youth centres. It is fair to say that the central government has cut down on funding for that. In terms of police, we've had a cut, and we're being told that we're going to get the same back, but over a period of time. Just like nurses, we're being told 50,000 nurses, or whatever the figure is. But then we now find out that it's over a 10-year period, and 19,000 of which are people that were going to be, I mean, they were going to be replaced anyway. You know, they were not going to go, but now they're coming back, or whatever else it is. It's a situation where, I mean, I appreciate that you're saying that the Labour Party has been in power in Tower Hamlets, which it has for a number of years. What would you like to see in Tower Hamlets? What would you, if you were the mayor of Tower Hamlets, or if you were the MP for a part of Tower Hamlets, what would you be pushing for?
I think what Tower Hamlets needs is more, as Sister just said, is more engagement, more outreach work.
Yeah.
It's about educating people while they're still young to make the right choices, showing them the consequences of their actions. Because a lot of times kids go out there, you see, the kids in my class have that, or the kids I go to college with have that, I want that. What's the quickest way to it? I'll go and sell some drugs for, you know, this guy who's a gangster who drives a flashy car, maybe I can have that. But they're not seeing how that's going to impact them in 5, 10, 15, 20 years' time, how that's going, what their life's going to look like when they're 40, 50, 60
But some
years
people
old.
might say, John, some people might say, well, look, you can't blame the government. It's your parents' faults. I mean, if the parents can't provide a moral compass, if they can't actually signpost them to sociable activities and you know, take care of the children, make sure when they're home, why they're carrying a knife, you know, where the money is coming from. If, for example, they see a kind of spending which is disproportionate to the income, why don't they raise the alarm bells? Surely, isn't it our problem? Isn't it the parents at home?
I absolutely agree with anyone that has that view, and I think the parents are ultimately responsible, and they should be the people that bring up their children. They're responsible for their children, they're responsible for the welfare, and they're responsible for guiding them the right way. However, what parents would say is, okay, look, we're too busy, or we can't, so if they're from a first generation Bangladesh background, they might say, look, our kids don't understand the language we speak, they're not engaged with us.
Or alternatively, they might say, well, we're doing our bit. During the hours that they leave the home and they're engaged in wider society, whether it be in school or out of school activities, they themselves are not immune from the environment around them. So if the environment around them is enticing them or persuading them, influencing them to go in a particular way, or if the social media which they're exposed to and which nobody can divorce themselves from, parents can't do that. Parents can't take your phone away from you.
Well, I mean, there are parental settings and there are...
Sure, but within reason. Yeah. Within reason, because if, for example, you as an individual have been bombarded by a particular you know, ideology or particular influences, whether it be from your peers or whether it's from wider society, there's only so much that a parent can do.
Absolutely. I mean, you're right, but as long as that parent created that relationship to begin with, where they have open communications, where they can have these discussions, where there is trust and transparency in what the children are doing, then you have that problem less. The problem is when the parents kind of leave schooling, parenting to the schools and the teachers and to their friends of their children to do, or the other people's parents. That's the problem. When they're not saying, where are you going? When are you coming back? They're not taking care. They're not even interested in what they're doing at school, what they're learning, whether they're doing well, whether they're not doing well.
Let me stop you there just before Barrister Jusna comes in. I'm going to go to a call. Hello, Assalamu alaikum, caller. Hello. Hello, caller.
Hello?
Hello there. Assalamu alaikum.
Walaikum salam. Yeah, hi. I'm calling from London.
Yes, you're live on air. I recognize your voice. Welcome.
Yeah.
What would you like to say?
No, I was just kind of agreeing with your only caller. So I call in. And then you mentioned about the youth and unemployment or lack of employment. I think, you know, what I understand is that there isn't this government. I think they're at a loss. They don't seem to give any incentive, you know. And if you look at the pay with everything, nobody's too interested. I mean, take for example, how many people want to do a nurse's job? Because most of these nurses, they're usually imported, aren't they? So,
well, I mean, I think doing the profession of being a nurse is actually very respectable and commendable. And if there is a nurse watching, I've got some good news for me, so alhamdulillah from me. But I mean, what do you mean by nobody wants to be a nurse? What's wrong with being a nurse?
No, but the thing is, I mean, if you look at it's a grubby job, isn't it? Although it might be for a noble job for some, but how many men or young boys would want to do it?
But there are
Can you
other.
imagine?
But what's the point you're making? Because whilst many professions are not very glamorous, they nevertheless are not only indispensable but also very important, respectable, as Jamal Bhai was saying. But in terms of your wider point, how can you blame the Conservative government for nursing being a tough profession? You mentioned something about remuneration.
I think.
What are you
well,
saying
I
about
do-
that? Are you saying that?
I do blame them because they're out of touch. I don't think they know what the younger generation wants. I mean, take for example, you have your Bojo or Bozo. He himself has
The
so
Prime
many kids
Minister,
that he's
the
not
Prime
even
Minister,
aware of.
the Prime
So
Minister.
how can a man like him know what the next generation would want? I don't think he has a clue.
Well, he's the Prime Minister, and the people
Yeah.
who voted for him, the overwhelming proportion of the
I
population.
didn't. Yeah.
Well, the overwhelming proportion of the
Yeah.
population have faith in him, believe him, and trust his leadership capabilities, and have voted him in. Why do you say? Why do you say that he lacks comprehension
look,
about
hold on.
what it
All
is that
you
the young
said I
people want?
dispute, because if you allow me, I'll explain. People only voted for him as a last resort. Let's face it, that 17.4 million voted for him because there was nothing else to vote for. I mean, what's the alternative? They did it in desperation. And, you know, the public is quite fickle and maybe sometimes even stupid. Because, you know, when they say what the saying goes, you can't believe what you read, everything you read in the papers. But people do believe, you know, there's such a thing as power of suggestion. So, look, it's going to be like that for some time. I dread it. You know, in 5 years' time, we'll all probably know one way or the other.
Well, just before you go, I mean, you've levied a very serious charge against the public. You're accusing them of being incompetent.
Can I ask a
unable.
question?
Yeah, sure. But I'm going to ask you a question, and Jamal Bhai, I think, wants to follow up. You're saying that there was no one else to vote for, but isn't it the case that that is democracy? And in the event that the options on the table, the best option is the one that people go for, do you have a problem with democracy? And Jamal Bhai wants to.
If you're going to echo on that, you're saying most people are stupid. So do you think most people should be allowed to vote, or do you think there should be some kind of qualification to see who can and who can't vote?
You say democracy, but I say democracy is theocracy for the astronomically stupid. I mean, look, you only vote for the rubbish that's been put out there. So you only elect what they select, and your election is from their selection. There's not much there to begin with.
So what's the alternative you would suggest this country adopts once we leave Europe?
I don't know what the alternative is. All I know is it's going to be like this for some time. I mean, can you imagine in 10 years' time? You know, they've had 10 years. They'll probably get another 10 years.
Thank you very much for your call. Very interesting. People who are, disenfranchised and people who feel alienated, perhaps they should also participate in the election process. Maybe even, stand themselves, or at the very least, pick up their pens and clipboards and go around canvassing on behalf of a particular party or an ideology that they believe would be better than what else is on the table. As always, grateful for your call and input. Ladies and gentlemen, we are coming towards the tail end of our program. I am going to go back to my guests and ask for their final thoughts on this particular topic. If I can come to Barrister Jusna first. We began with Brexit, and then we moved on very slightly to consider the impact of Brexit and the associated onslaught, as I would put it, but from an independent point of view, non-partisan point of view, the consequences of Brexit. What do you say about the foreseeable future, and impact that Brexit will have on the British Bangladeshi community?
Well, we've already seen some changes, some negative effects it's already had on the migrant community, I would say, which includes the Bangladeshi community,
Sure.
and that is the impact following from the increase of the criminal activities for so many reasons. And that, if it's not controlled by the government, for the reasons we've discussed, that can increase in the foreseeable future. There are going to be a lot of challenges ahead. Brexit, yes, it may happen on 31st, but I don't think talks will start until March, or maybe.
Well, they don't have to be concluded until the end of the year.
Yes.
But yeah, go on.
Sorry, but still, businesses will be affected. It has been affected, but I think we will see a change in the short term. But in the long run, I think the country's got a huge challenge ahead of it, and it needs to really get its acts together in terms of not only sort of changes in legislation, but in terms of the borders, in terms of the wider.
Thank you very much, Barrister Jusna. I've got to stop you there, only for time reasons. Always a pleasure listening to you, and I must go on to ask Jamal Bhai for his final thoughts on this topic today.
So my final thoughts on the topic are things are going to get worse before they get better. So try and prepare for that. Save what you can now, so that you can weather through it. Don't cash in on your gold right now. There's going to be a lot of uncertainty, and with uncertainty, gold prices go up, and the value of the pound will go up and down. There will be a lot of turbulence, so be prepared for that. It's not going to be plain sailing. Things will get better before they get worse.
Thank you
be
very much.
prepared to ride that out.
Thank you very much, Jamal Bhai and Barrister Jusna, both of you, for taking your time out to join us today and share your thoughts with our viewers. Ladies and gentlemen, thank you also for watching. It remains to be seen about what will happen in the aftermath of the 31st of January of this year, and whether or not the promises that we've been told will take place, the vision that we've been told that we can see and look forward to, whether or not that will materialize remains to be seen. British Bangladeshi community, of course, must always be prepared in order to safeguard their own particular interests, and we will no doubt be talking about the Brexit aftermath in the programs to come. Thank you again for watching. Do have a good evening, and thank you for listening to our guests as well. All the best. Assalamu alaikum.